Welcome to a special edition, I guess you could say, of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Ian Cameron, and we have Rob Vino back with us for his monthly appearance on the show. We're trying to get Rob on once a month throughout the football season. Even though content and shows and videos, it's a whirlwind at this time of year for both of us, but managed to get Rob in for a bonus episode. I know we already did the CFL show with Will Arndt yesterday, and we've got the NFL show coming up with Philip Nelson, but wanted to get Rob in here in the month of September to talk all things football. And I mean that when I say all things football. We're going to talk CFL, we're going to talk NFL, we're going to talk college football, all three. But Rob, great to have you with us. How are things, and how's the start to the football season going?
Things are good, Ian. And I will say that where the football season is concerned, the NFL has been terrific, and the college football has been a little less than what I would expect from myself. So we're 3-4 weeks in. I would have to rate it about 50-50. And how about all things football? How about the Australian Rules Football Championship this week? Geelong and Brisbane.
Yep, the Geelong Cats. I know. I follow it a little bit. I watch it when I can. It's also a fun variety of football. CFL's been a tremendous season for me. I would say NFL's been break even so far. I dug myself a hole in the first week of college football, and that's what really hurt. And I've been better since then, but when you try to dig out of a deficit and a tough start. So that's where I'm at too. I think I can definitely get a little better in college. NFL, it's too early to tell, and it's kind of break even so far. And then CFL's been great. And that is where we will begin, Rob, CFL football. Before we even get into week 17, obviously this was a big week for the league as far as the big announcement that rule changes were going to be made in the CFL. Now, when it first got well known and published out there that Stuart Johnston, the commissioner of the CFL, was going to make this major announcement, I mean, the speculation on social media was epic. It was wild. Everywhere from we're going to 4 downs, like it is in NFL and college football, that U.S. expansion is suddenly going to be back, and they're going to try that again for a second time. People fretting that the Memphis Mad Dogs and the Birmingham, Barracudas and the San Antonio Texans from back in the day, Baltimore Stallions were going to be back in the CFL again. Crazy speculation, but really what it was some cosmetic and, in my opinion, positive rule changes when it comes to the CFL game. And, we ran through them with Will Arndt. We'll just reiterate them quickly. The main ones are, the goalposts being moved to the back of the end zone. It was definitely a CFL staple that for some reason the uprights were right at the front of the end zone. And the negative for that over the years, Rob, has been, quarterbacks can hit the upright with trying to throw the ball into the end zone, and quarterbacks would have to adjust their throwing motion. Receivers would have to adjust their routes to the positioning of the goalposts and the uprights at the front of the end zone. Risk of injury. I've even seen it before. Someone loses where they are on the field, and they're trying to run a route down by the goal line, and bam, they wipe out, just crashing into the goalposts, right at the front of the end zone. So they've pushed it back to the back of the end zone, the uprights. And with that, they've shrunk the field from 55 yards on each side to 50 yards on each side. So a 100-yard field. And it's basically a package deal. Like, if you're going to push the uprights back to the back of the end zone, you have to shrink the field as well. And that's exactly what they've done there. They're going to make everything's going to be equal now as far as the size of the end zone, 15 yards instead of 20. Although the width of the field, which is also, as you know, Rob, exclusively Canadian and what makes it unique, will not change. It'll still be the wide field. It'll still be the wide end zones, but the length of the end zone will be down from 20 yards to 15 yards because there's certain stadiums, namely Montreal, where it's like a diamond-shaped end zone. Like, it's not equal length end zones in certain stadiums in the CFL, specifically Montreal. So that change makes sense. The one I like, and I think the one you will like, and I think the one that makes the biggest impact for bettors, and certainly totals bettors, over bettors in particular, is the play clock adjustment. And I know there's some CFL fans that told me, I don't think they quite got how the 20-second play clock, which is currently in play, worked. They just saw, the play clock is going to go from 20 to 35 seconds. Isn't that going to slow down the pace and tempo? It's going to increase it, and here's why. 20-second play clock right now does not start in the CFL right after the last play. It starts when the referee blows his whistle and, makes that winding motion with his arm. to start the 20-second play clock. And that normally doesn't happen in some instances until 20, 30 seconds, sometimes even 40 seconds after the previous play. Because what the referee has to do, Rob, when he's in charge of winding the play clock, the 20-second play clock, is before he even does that, he's got to make sure the ball's on the correct yard line, the yard markers are adjusted, that he counts all the players on the field so that, he doesn't throw a too many men on the field penalty. He's got to do all of these things for the next play each and every time, and he does all of that before he even starts winding the 20-second play clock. So that is why, and because of that, every referee is different, Rob. Some do it quickly, promptly, and some take their sweet time. And it takes forever for them to do all those little duties, move the ball on the line markers, make sure the yard markers are adjusted, count all the players on the field on both sides. And there's just these massive discrepancies between seconds between plays in the CFL in this current system with the 20-second play clock initiated by the referee. I saw an example in the BC Calgary game last week that one of the broadcasters brought to my attention, that there was 1 minute and 8 seconds between snaps in the BC Calgary game. There was a play at 8:50 left in the quarter, and then the next play was not until 7:42 left in the quarter. So on a 20-second play clock, there was 1 minute and 8 seconds of actual game clock time that elapsed between plays, because it obviously took this referee for this play. There were some penalties on the play with 8:50 to go, so he had to sort it all out, figure out the penalties. It was offsetting. Then he's got to make sure the ball's in the right spot, the yard markers are in the right spot, count all the players on the field, and the next thing you know, it's 1 minute and 8 seconds of elapsed game time until the next play, because it took him a long time in that particular instance, Rob, to get the 20-second play clock started and wind it up. The 35-second automatic play clock will eliminate that. It'll automatically start after the last play. It means the referee doesn't have to worry about winding the play clock anymore. And instead of these instances where it could be anywhere from, 30, 35 seconds to as much as 1 minute and 8 seconds in between plays, with the inconsistent lack of, no consistency, no uniformity when it comes to how many seconds between each play in the current system, now you will get that with the 35-second play clock starting next year, where it will be, probably in that 25 to 30 to 35 seconds in between each play, depending on how quickly the team snaps the ball. So that is going to be consistency, and it's going to lead to more plays and increased pace and tempo. So that change I like, no question about that. The rouge modification, we were talking about that eliminating the rouge for the missed field goals that are just out the back of the end zone and the punts out the back of the end zone, I can live with that. Not awarding a single point for those. You still will have the single point for any missed field goal or punt that is downed in the end zone. So if the opposing team takes a knee in the end zone or is tackled inside the end zone, it still will be a single point for those situations. The rouge still exists for that. It's just we don't want that Toronto-Saskatchewan from last year repeating itself, where a missed field goal back of the end zone when it's tied at 20 and you win the game on the final play. That is the point of the CFL making that change. Like, they don't want to reward failure. That's what people were kind of saying about how that game ended. So it's a modified rouge. And the one last thing I'll say about the goalposts is you won't have those missed field goal return touchdowns as much anymore. Because now, Rob, with the goalposts and the uprights at the back of the end zone, wide left or wide right means dead ball. Nobody's going to return it because it'll be out the back of the end zone. So you're going to miss that element of the game, the missed field goals that get returned, unless the field goals are short. Because if the field goals are short, they'll land in the end zone, and you still will get some missed field goal returns in those situations. But the ones for wide left or wide right, you will not see anymore. The one adjustment they'll have to make with the 35-second clock is inside 3 minutes. There's going to have to be something done, because one of the great things about the Canadian game is that with the 20-second play clock, and it stops after every play inside 3 minutes, the game clock, you've got a ton of plays that can happen. The league is known for comebacks. The league is known for these crazy scoring frenzies inside the last 3 minutes, especially of the fourth quarter. And you lose that a little bit with the 35-second play clock, because even though I think the 35-second auto play clock's great for the majority of the game, The last 3 minutes is the one negative about it, because a team could be up with 1:30 left now, Rob. Just take 3 knees and the game is over if the other team has no timeouts, and you can run out the clock, and you lose a little bit of that scoring frenzy late in the game. But the CFL is looking at contingency plans to deal with this. One that I've heard and one that I agree with, I hope they do this, a bank of timeouts given to both teams for usage only inside the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter. Like an extra 1 or 2 or even 3 timeouts given to each team. You'll just automatically get them when we hit the 3-minute mark of the fourth quarter, and then that will still help you in the 35-second play clock era to give you those opportunities to have those crazy finishes, more plays, comeback potential. And I think that's a good compromise. I would love to see that. That hasn't been made official yet, but it's something the league is looking at. A bank of timeouts given to both teams inside the last 3 minutes of the fourth. I'd love to see that. I think that would be a great way to work around the one concern I have about the 35-second clock, and that is the fact that teams would be able to run the clock out with about 1.5 minutes or so left in the game if the other team has no timeouts, which is a good chance they would have no timeouts if you're going to just use the timeouts that are given at the start of each half. The extra bank of timeouts means, it's going to be more difficult for teams to just run it out in the final 3 minutes, and you'll preserve those crazy, epic, just bonkers finishes that the CFL is known for in a lot of the games. So that's basically the rundown on the rule changes. Rob, any of the rule changes that stood out to you?
No, I don't think they, aside from the play clock, like you say, maybe adding some additional total plays, because if you ever do, I mean, if you're in the business of betting CFL and you do your own box score work and you keep your own spreadsheets, you'll see that the total plays in a CFL game are far less than what they are in a college football game or in an NFL game. So the total play, I mean, there's a couple games where some teams get off 40 plays in a game in the CFL, which is kind of crazy. And like you say, it's due to the inconsistencies between time span of each snap. So that will become a little more consistent. I like that bank of timeouts. I didn't hear that. I'm glad you said it.
Now, the bank of timeouts is not official yet, but it's something they're discussing because they know that the 3 minutes in the game, the 35-second play clock, it's going to be easier to just drain the clock and take the knees at the end if you're up. So they still want to preserve those the last minute when things can just go haywire in a CFL game in the fourth quarter. They still want that. And the bank of timeouts is an idea that can help preserve that. Yeah.
Yeah, and inside that idea, Ian, let's say you have 2 timeouts going into the 3-minute warning. The bank of timeouts would get added to the 2 you already have. You would have extra.
That's going to be the question. That's a great question. That's an excellent question. Would this only be granted if you have no timeouts going into the 3 minutes, or would this just be tacked on to what you already have remaining? So you could have a situation where you have 1 or 2 timeouts, and let's say it's 2 extra timeouts inside 3 minutes. Suddenly you have 3 or 4 timeouts to work with, and then you really preserve the game. And there's a lot more plays available that are going to transpire in the last 3 minutes. So I like the idea. It's just a matter of how are they going to actually implement it. It's a great question, though. It is.
Yeah, no, it all sounds good. Like I say, we were kidding around. You were talking about it, messaging each other, and I'm like, well, I don't want to give up the single for going out of the end zone. Overbetters need as many as we can get, but it does make a ton of sense. And hey, listen, the NFL had the goalposts in the 60s, 50s, 60s, early 70s. They were in the front of the end zone until, like you mentioned, too many D-backs and wide receivers running into those posts, and it does alter throws from the quarterback, so they move in the back. It's a good idea to do so for safety, if nothing else.
Yeah, the automatic play clock, other than the concerns about the 3 minutes, and I think they're going to address it. I love that because I think it's kind of absurd. The referee's got to do all this stuff and wind the play clock, and he can't wind the play clock until he sets the ball, checks that the yard markers are lined up properly, make sure that there's nobody's got too many men on the field after he counts up the players. Only after all that does he then blow the whistle and wind the play clock. And there'd be crazy discrepancies. Like I've seen times where with the 20-second play clock, it's like 28 seconds. So it's not much after the last play. It's 8 seconds, then he winds the play clock. So quickly. And then there's those instances where I mentioned the example last week, BC Cal, 1 minute and 8 seconds between plays on a 20-second play clock. Just way too much inconsistency with how many seconds elapse between plays, and the 35-second automatic play clock will eliminate that. So that definitely I like for sure. Speaking of what we like, let's find out what we like for week 17 here in the CFL. We've got Calgary, Montreal. Montreal 4-point home favorites, 50.5 the total. The unbeaten as a starting quarterback in the CFL, Davis Alexander, back at quarterback for the Montreal Alouettes. He has yet to lose as a starting quarterback in this league. He is obviously the best they've got after the inconsistencies of McLeod Bethel-Thompson and Caleb Evans and James Morgan. We've seen it all from the Montreal Alouettes at the quarterback spot. But certainly they're thrilled to have Davis Alexander back. This is a team that's gotten healthier. And this is a team that even despite not having DA the last couple weeks have managed to win. Now, they managed to win last week in spite of a horrific game from McLeod Bethel-Thompson. Typical Macbeth, typical MBT. He has one of the best games I'll ever see him play against Saskatchewan on the road a couple weeks ago. I couldn't believe how he was lighting up that Riders secondary. And he comes back and he just looks horrific last week against the Argos. I'll never, as someone that had Montreal double result, lead at halftime and win the game, unforgivable that interception right at the end of the second quarter that gave Toronto a free field goal there to take the lead going into halftime. Ridiculous that he actually threw that football, that he thought it was a good idea to throw that football. So Davis Alexander back is huge. We've talked about how they've gotten healthier both sides of the ball. Calgary, there was questions what their quarterback situation was like. Vernon Adams left that game against BC last week to injury. PJ Walker finished the game, but he got banged up, and PJ Walker's out indefinitely. We're not going to see him anytime soon. Vernon was limited in practice earlier this week, but he did return in full a couple days later, and he will start. Although there are questions about not only how healthy he is, but his recent decline in the level of play. You know, he's got the back issue. He's taken some shots to the head area this year. So he's got those two body parts ailing. And then I think his level of play is ailing. If you go back to Labor Day, Rob, the 28-7 win, don't be fooled by that. He didn't play great in that game. He had less than 200 passing yards. He struggled against Edmonton again in the rematch where they lost 31-19. He had a very lackluster performance that day. And we all saw what happened in the big showdown of the two former teammates last week, Nathan Rourke and Vernon Adams head-to-head. Nathan Rourke just much better. And Vernon Adams, two bad interceptions early in that game that put Calgary behind the 8 ball. So it's a concern of how healthy is he, A, and B, can he get back to the Vernon Adams we saw early in the season when he was a most outstanding player candidate, you know, in the first, I would say, month of the season when the Calgary Stampeders got off to that great start. So, you know, I like Montreal to win. I took Montreal early in the week when I got the sense Davis Alexander was going to be back. It was -3 at that time. But I also played Montreal in a 2-team money line parlay with another team that we'll get to in a moment that I think makes sense. I mean, you're talking about a guy that hasn't lost as a CFL starting quarterback, Davis Alexander, and some real concerns after that red-hot start for Calgary that they're coming back down to earth. Bob Slowick's defense has not been anywhere near as good the last few weeks. They've been ripped apart. VA's health, VA's struggles. Lots to be concerned about for Calgary right now. Obviously a spot where you would think they want to turn it around after getting blown out, but it won't be easy with Montreal getting their best quarterback by far back on the field here on Friday night. Rob, what do you think here for Stamps Owls?
Yeah, what a difference a few weeks makes, right? I mean, in Montreal, for what it's worth, you want to get healthy at this time of year. The receiving core, all three of those guys are weapons. Snead has come from nowhere, really, to be a huge weapon this year. Makes all the big catches, really. He did last week as well. And then having Davis Alexander back. But I'll point to what you said last. And you know, Nathan Rourke and BC are absolutely on an offensive tear the last 8-9 weeks. I mean, we talked about their team total just being an absolute given at some point. But when your numbers statistically result in 16.6 yards of completion, 13.8 yards per attempt, like they did last week against Calgary, 14 yards every time you drop back. No matter what happens, it's 14.8 yards. Those are insane numbers. Calgary's defense has been banged up quite a bit. And we remember back in the beginning of the year, when head coach Dave Dickerson told us this defense is better than you think. Remember, they had to replace every single starter. I think they were the one team that had 0 starters coming back. And now they look like a team that is just worn out from the season. Montreal's getting healthy offensively. Now the explosion, you know, during the time when Alexander and the receivers were hurt. It was just a question of, can the defense hang on for us? That's a good defensive front. I totally like Montreal in this game. I did play him, as you said you did earlier this week on the Davis Alexander news. The only concern you have, Ian, is does he come back a hair bit rusty? Because I was about to play them first half as well, because the number gets chopped in half. But let's give him the first half. He may come back 100%. Who knows? But if he doesn't, I think over the course of a full game, the differences between all four of these units will show. Montreal's offense against the other side's defense, Calgary's offense, as you mentioned, Vernon Adams struggling against the Montreal defense. They're going to heat them up a little bit. And Calgary, 52 points allowed last week. I'm not expecting 52, but I think Montreal now, they can place themselves, I would say, in firm playoff position with a victory here. The win over Toronto was huge last week. A win here probably puts them in. And they're dangerous. I didn't look it up, and maybe you did, and I should have, because I thought of it at the time. A future on Montreal at this point to win the Grey Cup is as good as any.
One step ahead of you. I took it like last week.
Did you get it?
Before Davis knew, figured Davis would come back this week, and last week's when I took it at plus 450.
Yeah, see, that's a nice price.
Yeah. Because they can beat. I'm scared of them as a Ticat fan in the East. I think we could still win the East, the Ticats, because of where we're at, and we have the tiebreaker because we've won the season series against Montreal. And both of our wins were against Montreal backup quarterbacks, by the way, James Morgan and McLeod Bethel Thompson. We still haven't faced Montreal with Davis Alexander yet this year. So like I said, I think they could still come out of the East come playoff time. And like I said, they're as live as any team with a healthy Davis Alexander, in my opinion, on the field. Someone was confused saying, you keep mentioning this guy that's the Calgary DC. Isn't he coaching in the NFL? No, this is the old man, Bob Slowick. That's the DC for Calgary. His son is Bobby Slowick, and Bobby Slowick's the guy that's in the NFL. His kid, who was the offensive coordinator for the Texans for a couple of years. And I think he's actually in the Miami coaching staff right now in the NFL. This is his old man, Bob Slowick. That's the DC here for the Calgary Stampeders. All right, Toronto and BC. We've got BC 10-point home favorites. This has moved down, actually. I should point out we've seen some significant line movement. 7.5 now is the BC Lions. And this is all reaction to Nick Arbuckle's back. And I know Nick Arbuckle, first of all, he's had a great season. And second of all, this is a reaction that I think is warranted because of how bad Jared Dagey was. Like, this is a big deal. And this is a big, vast upgrade at quarterback for the Toronto Argonauts, given how well Arbuckle's played for the majority of the season. So getting him back is huge for this Argos team, no question. Remember, they played in Toronto back in August, and Toronto lit up. Nick Arbuckle lit up this BC Lions defense. It was ugly in that game for the Lions on that side of the football. And Nathan Rourke and the Lions offense, and I still cashed a BC team total, arguably the best betting streak going in the CFL right now, is BC Lions team totals over. 9 straight BC games have gone over their team total. They're looking for 10 games in a row, BC, going over their team total. They're looking for 9 in a row over the full game total, because BC games have gone over 8 straight, the full game over going into this game. I think you were on this show the week before Toronto played BC, and we both made the case for the over in that game, and it was no sweat. That's where I'm going here. I know it's the highest total on the board by far. Highest, higher by 6 points, this total, than the Calgary-Montreal game, higher than by 5 points than the Hamilton-Winnipeg game, higher than a Saskatchewan-Edmonton by a couple points, but it's that for a reason. Like, Toronto should move the ball against BC. Still suspect defense. Credit to them. They got some turnovers out of VA. They played a little bit better last week against Calgary, but I think it's still going to be a team that I don't trust to fully shut down an offense. And then you said it. I've said it. We know it. Nathan Rourke, there's no quarterback. There's no offense playing better right now than the BC. I mean, just unbelievable numbers. They're getting into the 30s every week. Now, the team totals, they're going up, but we're still getting BC below that key number of 35. Their team total is in that 33.5 range for this game. So I like BC team total over 33.5. I like the over 56.5, both of those in this game. It wouldn't shock me if the Argos go over their team total either, which is around that 22.5, 23.5 range. I've done this before, Rob, where I just pigeonhole these both team totals over and the full game over. I've had a couple 3-0 sweeps doing that this year in the CFL. This feels like one of those games to do that. Both team totals over, and I think the game can go over as well. What do you think, Argos Lions?
Well, let me start with the Argos team total. I mean, the market price, they've gone over this price that's being offered 10 of their last 11. And Nick Arbuckle has been sensational in carrying this team. All those weeks were like, when's Chad Kelly coming back? When's Chad Kelly coming back? And they did the right thing, just stuck with Arbuckle. He's been tremendous for the offense. So what's surprising to me, Ian, and real quick, I'll get back to full game totals. BC, 6 of their last 7 have gone over 60. So it's 56.5 really too high. For Toronto, 5 of their last 6 have gone over 60. So, maybe the odds maker hasn't caught up yet. And to me, it's a surprise that Arbuckle gets announced as available, likely to start here. And as you mentioned, the side goes down. Toronto money comes in on that news, but the total sticks right where it was. There's no correlating move here. I mean, to me, when he was announced, it pushed me to over. First of all, I'm like, oh, well, of course, that's the way I think. I'm wired that way, but I'm thinking, of course, this game should go over. You're asking for 28 aside. It's not too much to ask, in my opinion. As we said earlier, BC just 3 more touchdowns outside the red zone last week. The explosiveness of this team is crazy right now. Rourke using his legs to his advantage a lot this season, more than last season. So to me, 56.5, just too low for all those reasons.
I like what they did. And Buck Pierce has come under some flack this year as head coach, but he is still a good what got him the job was his work as an offensive coordinator in Winnipeg all those years with Zach Collaros. And I thought it was a great game plan offensively last week for Buck Pierce and the Lions because they didn't have James Butler, their best running back. But the short passing game became the run game. Nathan Rourke's legs became the run game. And Calgary just had no answers for it. So they adjusted very well to being without James Butler last week, their starting running back. And it was just a brilliant offensive performance for sure by the BC Lions. What's impressive about BC when you look at this team is the fact that they didn't have Javon Catoy to become one of their better receivers. And then you see who else is stepping up, though. But they've still got Keon Atcher. They've still got Justin McGinnis. They've got the likes of this Barry Hill and Aiden Eberhardt. And they've just got so many different receivers that have stepped up, even when one guy goes down. And we certainly saw that last week for BC. So very much still a lot of depth at that receiving core, even with Javon Catoy missing that game last week for the Lions. But very impressive. Offensively, it feels like more points will be on the way between these two teams here on Friday night. All right, we go to Saturday. My Hamilton Tiger Cats taking on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Winnipeg 1.5-point home favorites, 51.5 the total. I know I sent you those images from the bar I was at last Saturday prior to the Edmonton-Hamilton game. It was a great bar, man. It's like a sports book in there. Like they got all the college games, CFL, MLB, you name. They'll put anything on because they get everything at that place. Like if you want the sportsbook experience in Hamilton, go to End Zone Bar and Grill. You'll find it there for sure. Great spot. A great game by the Ticats. Very exciting game. That was a very entertaining game. Edmonton and Hamilton, back and forth, back and forth. It turned into quite the duel between Cody Fajardo and Bo Levi Mitchell last week in that game. Very, very entertaining game. And it ended up being a walk-off field goal for the Ticats, courtesy of Mark Leggio, to get the victory 29-27 over Edmonton. Hamilton continues to find ways to win. I will say this, that's finally the first time they've played a team that had their starting quarterback. They kind of had feasted on, a few teams that, some Dustin Crumbs on their schedule, some James Morgans on their schedule. They had been dealing with certainly some backup quarterbacks, and the defense is still a work in progress. They're not a great defense, Hamilton. I don't think they ever will be this year, but they seem to be able to do enough. The one thing last week that was critical, it seemed like when Edmonton was building momentum and moving the ball, bam, there's that big sack on Cody Fajardo, because the Edmonton offensive line, which has had problems at times, it did show up last week, and the pass rush was pretty good when it had to be for the Ticats in that win. Of course, and Chris Drevler, forgot about that, of course. Another situation where Hamilton faced a backup quarterback just 2 weeks ago in Hamilton where they won 32-21, and I was there in the stadium. He couldn't have been worse, Strevler. I mean, just, two, actually, it could have been last week with 54 passing yards against Ottawa. But even 2 weeks ago against Hamilton, I mean, bad decisions, inaccurate, the whole bit, just not a good passer. Just, it's always been his issue, Chris Strevler, and it still is. So getting Zach Collaros back, and he will be back to start this week for Winnipeg, it's big, at least for the passing game. There's no question about that. Winnipeg, we know how strong the home field is. It was ugly, but they did beat Ottawa last week in spite of 54 passing yards. Leave it to Ottawa and Bob Dice to do that. Somehow lose a game where you give up only 54 passing yards to the opposing team. But there were special teams blunders. There were 2 critical interceptions thrown by a returning Drew Brown in that game for Ottawa, and just too many penalties and mistakes by this Ottawa Red Blacks team to cost them a game they should have won, quite honestly. But Winnipeg will take it, as ugly as it was, and as bad as Chris Strevler was. They found a way to win. And now they're playing with revenge because they lost to Hamilton a couple weeks ago. I know from experience, Hamilton struggles in Winnipeg. They have won maybe once, twice in the last, 10 years when they've gone to Winnipeg. This has been a tough place for them to win. So I think the Bombers are probably the play here at a near pick 'em in this game. This is another one where I look at the total, and I hate to be repetitive, but we did get to 53 points with Hamilton and Winnipeg 2 weeks ago with Chris Strevler at quarterback, and we still got to 53 points. And this total is 51.5, and there's a big upgrade in the passing game going to Zach Collaros. So 51.5 could only play over in this game. Rob, what do you think here? Hamilton, Winnipeg.
Totally agree. Over Palooza, right? I think it was brought to my attention first. I kind of had some soft awareness of it, but I think you made it clear about 6 weeks ago, or whenever we last spoke, about this Winnipeg secondary. But you caught it early on. I started to pay attention. And if you just look at last week, you can tell it's gotten no better. Ottawa could not run the ball if you, I, and 9 other of our colleagues were on the defensive side. They can't run it, and you know that. And yet they still threw for 389 against that defense. I mean, that secondary, Willie Jefferson has like 3 sacks 16 weeks in. They don't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback.
I wonder if age is getting to him. This is a Hall of Famer. He's going in the Hall of Fame when his career's over. He has been a dominant pass rusher for a decade in this league, but there has been a noticeable decline. He's not getting to the quarterback anywhere near as much as he's done in the past.
No, and I think if there's still an asset to his game, obviously it's probably veteran savvy, but the fact that he gets his long arms up still and does deflect passes. But as far as putting pressure on the
PBU machine, pass breakups.
That's absolutely what the value is right now. But the secondary can't cover, Ian. And if you can't pass rush, it's a hand in glove relationship between pass rush and pass coverage. And if you can't do one or the other, you're going to find an issue either, one way. And for Bo Levi Mitchell, it should be easy pickings on this secondary. And having Collaros back, I mean, I can't add anything to what you just said. What Strevler did last week was absolutely horrendous. You can't play any worse as a passing quarterback in any league. And so
it's hard in this damn league to have just 54 passing yards. That's impressive in a bad way. Yeah.
And his asset is his mobility, or at least his legs. And he got sacked 4 times. And so having Collaros back is huge. And again, I'll just go to the simple mathematics of it. You pointed it out. They scored 53 2 weeks ago with Strevler at quarterback. This total is 51.5 with Collaros at quarterback and Winnipeg on their home field. And I trust Bo Levi Mitchell and company to get their end done. And now, certainly, Winnipeg, for what it's worth, as much as I sit here and criticize, et cetera, they've still been able to score points somehow, some way throughout this quarterback injury-riddled season for Collaros. They're still in mid-20s a lot of times. And like you said, when a 127-yard missed field goal attempt happens and stuff like that, they find ways to score. So for me, over 51.5.
Yeah, I think it probably should get over that number as well, in my opinion here. And like I said, for Winnipeg back home, we know Princess Auto Stadium, very strong home field for sure. The only concern I would have, because I like the over, I bet the over. I'm on Winnipeg and the over, Winnipeg money line over 51.5. The only concern is don't be the Bo Levi Mitchell that went on the road against a good Western team earlier this year in Saskatchewan, and he couldn't get out of his own way in that game. I still remember it in Saskatchewan, and the offense just, as loaded as they are and as good as they normally play, They didn't play well that day in Saskatchewan against the Riders. So let's hope it's better here. Although to me, there's no comparison. The Riders' defense in the secondary to the Bombers. The Riders have a pretty good secondary. I can't say that about the Bombers, especially since they lost Terrell Bonds and Jamal Parker. Those two losses in the secondary have been massive for them, and they've been and Mike O'Shea's been plugging holes here, there, and everywhere. One thing I want to point out: nobody was more vocal and upset about the rule changes than Mike O'Shea, coach of the Bombers, Canadian, and Nathan Rourke, who was very, very upset about them. So beware for Toronto on Friday night. You already got this quarterback on fire right now, not playing any better, and now he's angry too and pissed off about all these rule changes. So look out, Toronto, maybe on Friday night with Nathan Rourke, that you're having to deal with. All right, our last game for CFL Week 17, Saskatchewan-Edmonton. Saskatchewan 3.5-point road favorites, 54.5 the total. Edmonton's been a money train for me, Rob. There's no question. 8-1 against the spread. 9 games since Cody Fajardo replaced Trey Ford at quarterback. I mean, that's impressive. They've covered numbers, a lot of them as underdogs. They've been right there in every game, and even the games they've lost, like the last two, right down to the wire. So it is not easy to lay points against Edmonton. However, I like how this sets up for the Saskatchewan side, and I'll explain why. They got bombed before the bye against Montreal. This was one of the worst games you'll see them play, both sides of the ball. It took Trevor Harris and the offense a while to get going. The defense shut the Rider offense down for a good chunk of the first half. And then the Saskatchewan defense got abused by McLeod Bethel Thompson, which was stunning to see it, how he was just slicing up that usually really good Saskatchewan secondary, and Montreal just putting up the points in bunches in that game against Saskatchewan. So they go into the bye week with that awful taste in their mouth, Saskatchewan losing that game. Now you come out of the bye week and, you stew on that loss. You get ready to make amends, and all the talk has been we're a better team than we showed before the bye. We need to make amends for it. The one concern is they are a bit banged up in that secondary. And maybe that did play a role in McLeod Bethel Thompson lighting it up, because other than Marcus Sales and Rolly Milligan, who are outstanding, they were missing a few other parts in that secondary against Montreal. And a lot of those players are still very much questionable to play here in this game against Edmonton. So, again, that injury report, which, again, CFL.ca does a great job, of posting those daily injury reports. But even though they're going to have two of their best in the secondary available in Marcus Sales and Roland Milligan, Tevin Campbell may not play. He's a key cog in that secondary. Nelson Lacombo may not play. He's a key cog in that secondary. So there's still a couple of pieces banged up there on that side. The good news is the offense. This is about as great a receiving core as Trevor Harris is going to have had to work with in a long time. Sean Bain is healthy. Sam Emelis, who's a great receiver, is finally healthy, back on the field. They got Ajo back on the field, or they signed him a few weeks ago. He's now part of this receiving core again after a tryout in the NFL that he had. And they get a forgotten man. You almost forgot he was on this football team. But if you remember last year and previous years, he's been a damn good receiver. Kean Schaefer-Baker. Remember that name? This is a guy that has not played for Saskatchewan in a long time. He is finally healthy, and he will be back. So when you factor in Schaefer-Baker healthy, Bain healthy, Sam Emelis healthy, Ajo back from his stint in the NFL, to go with the likes of the guys that have stepped up, Keyshawn Johnson, Myers, Joe Robustelli, Tommy Neild. These are all guys that have been good for Saskatchewan in the receiving. All of a sudden, the receiving core's got tons of depth, and Corey Mace has decisions to make. You can't play 10 receivers. You're going to have to cut this down some way. So it's a good problem to have for sure for Saskatchewan's offense coming out of the bye week, that they're as healthy as they've been all year at receiver. But what I worry about, Rob, with this game for Edmonton is, even though they've been a covering machine, do you have what it takes mentally from as far as your psyche to get off the mat following these last two losses? These are heartbreaking, soul-sucking losses that they've suffered the last 2 weeks. You lose on a walk-off field goal to Toronto 2 weeks ago. You lose in a back-and-forth game last week, another walk-off field goal at the hands of Hamilton. That's two crushing losses. Your playoff hopes are kind of slipping away. Can you get off the mat if you're Mark Killam's team in his rookie year as head coach and find a way to just battle again, as you've done such a good job of doing? That's a question to me, because when you lose two games like that in heartbreaking fashion back-to-back, it's not easy to get yourself up mentally and say, hey, we can still do this thing And then you're welcoming in a Saskatchewan team that's livid with their performance prior to the bye, rested and raring to go. Oh, and a Saskatchewan team that's won and covered 5 straight at Commonwealth Stadium against Edmonton. They've played very well in this building in recent years. So I laid the small number here. Maybe I'm going to regret it because Edmonton's just been treating me so nicely, ATS, Rob, from a betting perspective for weeks. But I feel this might be the right time. This might be the right spot to get off the Edmonton Express and back Saskatchewan in a plus spot, off a loss and off a bye, and a team they've not only played well against, but specifically here in Edmonton at Commonwealth Stadium. So I laid the 3.5 with Saskatchewan. This is another game where I could make a case for the over again. Edmonton had that run of unders for a while, and then all of a sudden they give up the 31 to Toronto, the 29 to Hamilton last week, 60 points combined in those 2 games. Over history in these 2 teams head-to-head, 4-1. Last 5 meetings have gone over, so this is at 54.5, another over lean for me. Rob, Saskatchewan, Edmonton.
Yeah, I agree with a ton of what you're saying, Ian, and specifically the Saskatchewan over 29.5. I really, and you talked about the receiving core. Let's face it, Sam Emilus, when I was reading an article on his return and Schaefer Baker's return, Sam Emilus only in 4 games, 20 catches for 361 yards, 90 yards a game. You can't really, well, maybe you can quantify how important he is to that receiving core. But when you have that many options and the run game to go with it, boy, it just makes it really tough for Edmonton. And I'll just speak from a playoff perspective here real quick because we're into that stage now. Saskatchewan, this game goes last. They'll know what Calgary did. Calgary plays the day before. A Calgary loss all but seals the number 1 spot in that division for Saskatchewan. I know mathematically they could lose their last 3. Calgary could win their last 3, and head-to-head is a split. But basically, if Calgary does lose, Saskatchewan could lock up the number 1 seed and the division title. And if Calgary wins, it just forces them to continue winning to get to that top spot. So on the other side of that playoff, let's call it tunnel, is Edmonton staring up now at 5-9 off of the 2 losses that you mentioned. And I just think after a while, when you don't have the on paper talent the rest do, and you're just fighting 100% every single week, at some point the ship sinks. And I don't know that mentally it will sink, but when you start pointing out, as you did, the amount of points they've given up the last 2 weeks, it just goes to show that the wear and tear, I think, has gotten to Edmonton a little bit here. So for me, I think Saskatchewan's team total over is a really solid play. And I would also agree with them winning this game by 4+ points. If nothing else, their results off of a bye week this year have been a mixed bag. They came off of 1 bye and lost to Calgary. They came off of the other bye and absolutely whacked Hamilton. It's the game you talked about where Bo Levi made a couple of crazy mistakes, picking the end zone, etc. But I trust, you talked about Bob Dice. I trust Corey Mace. He seems to find a way to get his team into the victory circle, no matter what the injury situation or whatever.
And that was an absolute dud against Montreal before that bye week for Saskatchewan as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd play him.
Yep. I like
over the total. 30 points, I think, is very doable for Saskatchewan.
All right, Rob, can isolate Saskatchewan's team total here, 29.5 to go over as far as that's concerned. All right, this is going to be fun because we got Rob for about another 20, 25 minutes here on the show. This is a segment I decided we'd do called Overpalooza. We like our overs. I'm just going to run through a handful of games, college football, NFL, for the upcoming week that I've bet over, and we'll see if Rob agrees with it. Maybe I'm hoping he disagrees with some of them. Like he says, I actually think this is a bad handicap on your part, or I think this is probably going to go the other way and go under, but we will see. This will be fun because we both like overs. So I will throw out games. We'll start with college football. Games that these are games that the over has either already made my card, or I bet it already, or I'm very likely going to bet over in all these games that I'm about to mention. The first game that I'll mention is going to go Friday night. It's one of the 3 Friday night games in college football. That's Florida State, Virginia. The 2 teams are a combined 7-0 to the over this year. Tommy Castellanos looks comfortable. They're averaging almost 9 yards per play. I don't think Virginia's defense is very good at all. And what's the best defense they've played? NC State? And I like CJ Bailey and NC State's offense. I've had some overs with them this year. But boy, oh boy, I think this is Florida State's offense might even be better, in my opinion, than NC State. So I think this is going to be a challenge for Virginia's defense. But then you turn it around to Virginia's offense, Chandler Morris, Jamari Taylor running the football. That is a balanced offense. They average over 313 passing per game, over 200 rushing per game. You can't get better balance than that from this Virginia offense. And as much as Florida State's defense played well against Bama, first game of the year, and they did play okay. They only gave up 17 points. It was still Ty Simpson making his first start. And then you played nobodies after that, essentially. So I think Florida State's defense is in for a challenge. And I think both teams can help get that game into the 60s. So, Rob, Florida State, Virginia over. Agree or disagree?
I totally agree. And I really speak to it from the Virginia side. And last week I did a little segment for Wager Talk called Most Overlooked. And the top two on my list for most overlooked were the Virginia offense, which then went out and scored 48 against Stanford in a game that was totaled at 49, which was ridiculous. And if we get to this, we get to this. If we don't, we don't. But Air Force completely. Air Force defensively, more horrendous than you think, offensively capable of throwing the football. So those are my two for that. In this particular instance, I think Virginia has shown they can score on anybody. And for Florida State, Castellanos has brought a new breed of new style of confidence back to Florida State, and they move the football as well. Virginia hasn't really stopped anybody. They still gave up 20 to a Stanford team that can't do much to get out of their own way offensively. So I agree with you there.
All right, so now we go to Saturday, and one of the overs on my card for Saturday, we'll see if Rob agrees. We're going to Memphis and FAU with this next one. And this one's interesting because if you look at FAU's offense, they haven't really clicked like I thought they would. When I thought this great situation that they had here with Caden Veltkamp, the Western Kentucky transfer, and the cohesion with his coaching staff and the offense, and it was going to hit the ground running. Well, they've moved the football in a lot of games, but they shot themselves in the foot, so many times. I mean, stopped on downs and turning the ball over, in critical situations. I think at home here, though, against a Memphis defense, it's played very well, but, they still gave up 31 in the upset win against Arkansas last week. I think going on the road, and the secondary to me is still a little bit the weaker part of Memphis defense. So I think FAU can throw it on them a little bit. And the FAU defense is just very bad. And you're talking about an FAU team that on offense snaps the ball around 18 seconds per play, right up there near the top of college football as far as pace and seconds per play are concerned. So I think FAU offensively, maybe a little mild letdown for Memphis on the defensive side of the football after the win against Arkansas, that FAU can just look, if they turn the ball over multiple times again, I'm in trouble with it, because that's what's hurt with some of these previous games for Florida Atlantic. But it's also alarming they gave up 38 points to Florida International in the Shula Bowl, this FAU defense. So over 62.5 for me here, Rob. What do you think? Agree, disagree? FAU, Memphis over.
Yeah, it's 62.5. The game has since moved to 63, and they continue to take numbers away from us, Ian, right? It opened 61.5. They took our 62 with them. They took our 63 now with us. Now we have to get to 64, which isn't as key, but it's still, there's plenty of numbers that fall on 64. Couple of things here real quick. It would be so Memphis to beat Arkansas last week and to come back and give up 35 here. Florida Atlantic's capable.
I did bet a little plus 14, by the way, on FAU here. I did.
Yeah, and Zach Kitley, as you mentioned, they're the number one against FBS teams. They're the fastest paced team in the country. It's his MO. They're going to go quick. You're going to get possessions. You're going to get plays, et cetera, and you're going to get Memphis able to move the football. What I think when I say it would be so Memphis to beat Arkansas, my point is that it would be so Memphis to come out and give up 35 or 38 to Florida Atlantic. Now, they have to do it. Like you said, FAU has to do it. And they haven't really, to use your words, clicked the way that I thought they would have clicked either. But I did cash huge. One of my largest plays so far this year was that FAU over, because it was so low priced. We're betting against numbers here. I think that total was like 50. It was played in a lot of rain like crazy in that game, but they didn't start it right away, which helps. They didn't have to interrupt it. Even at 63.5, I agree with you, because I do think that Memphis, no matter what, they'll have the ball enough times to get themselves to 35, 38. And from there, you need the other side to get themselves to 27. I think that's very possible here.
All right. I want to make sure I keep an eye on the clock because we want to make sure we wrap up in around 20 minutes for Rob. So I'll speed it up here quickly. I don't have much to say about this next game that I bet over because until I see one of their games go under the total, I'm betting them over every week. Notre Dame, Arkansas over. Not much more to add. What do you think?
Yeah, Taylor Green's been great, and Notre Dame's defense has been way less than what we thought it was. I mean, it's hard to see anybody stopping Arkansas at this point in time, especially the way Notre Dame's defense has played. So I saw a little bit of take back today, Ian. I think I saw from 64.5 back to 64.
Is it maybe worry of the early start, noon Eastern, because we saw that really hurt the Texas Tech-Utah game last week as far as points. Yeah. But again, that's a West Coast game too. This is not. This is a little bit more on the east side of things. So I don't think it's as big a deal, but maybe people are concerned, sleepy start, and maybe the points get subdued because of that.
Yeah, Arkansas hasn't stopped anybody yet. And that ground game of Notre Dame still is. It was Price last week. It wasn't even Love. It was Price who did all the damage. So that duo was tough.
There you go. Tennessee, Mississippi State. This one I took over. I was on UAB Tennessee over last week between the Blazers and the Volunteers. This one, the concern I'd have is, do we really know how great Blake Shapen in the offense is for Mississippi State? Because this is obviously going to be a tougher test. But the more I watch Tennessee's defense, I thought Tennessee was going to have a lock, stock, and barrel phenomenal D for Josh Heupel this year. But the more I watch Tennessee's defense, there's some holes in it. UAB was moving the ball at times last week. We saw them struggle with Gunnar Stockton in that, first big-time road game for him with Georgia, a few weeks ago. And we know we love Aguilar in the Joey Aguilar, Chris Brazzell combination for Tennessee in the passing game has just been sensational. And I know the Bulldogs on defense under Jeff Lebby, and they still play fast on offense, good offense, and the defense has really improved, no doubt. Absolutely a better defense than last year. But is it better enough to really keep what can be a very fast-paced, explosive, quick strike Tennessee offense down for 4 quarters, even at home in Starkville? I have my doubts. So I did play the over here. What do you think for Tennessee, Miss State?
The latter part of your analysis there is what you weigh against each other, right? Ian, you weigh the amount of plays and possessions you're going to get in this game because they're both within the top 17 as far as seconds per play go, against how improved is that Mississippi State defense. Now, last week it was real easy against UAB. Trent Dilfer has just made a mess of that program, and they can't stop anybody. So it was easy for Tennessee to score after score after score. Will it be that easy this time around? I'm not sure, but I do know, like you said, the game's going to go fast. There's going to be some explosives. I don't know that Mississippi State is all that explosive still. For those who don't know, Jeff Lebby is a product of Art Briles' power spread system. There should be explosives involved. Haven't really seen them yet out of Mississippi State. So to me, I'm going to equate 2 teams real quick here for you, and then we can get on to the next game. Mississippi State offensively and Arizona State under Kenny Dillingham offensively. It's another squad with Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson and those guys that I just don't see with the explosion that they should have so far this season. So maybe Mississippi State, because of the better defense and a less explosiveness, holds that game back, but you have to be afraid of 17 possessions aside, which, can get to the total by itself. Yeah,
I think that is definitely some truth to that. All right. We can't always target the totals with some, I've picked a lot of games, or mentioned a lot of games with totals in the 50s, totals in the 60s so far. How about an over that I like with a total in the 40s? Let's go there. San Jose State, Stanford. Like that game over the total. Now, I know you're not going to get the same amount of pace. That's why the totals are in the 40s. But I'm seeing some little bit of pulse, little bit of a life from Gulbranson, Frank Reich, and that Stanford offense the last few games. And we know the defense is starting to look a little bit like last year's defense. Certainly it did last week against Virginia, where they give up 48 points, albeit that's a very good Virginia offense. And then, of course, recently we saw San Jose State with Eget, the quarterback, who and San Jose State scored points last year when they played Stanford, upset Stanford, or got the win against Stanford last year in this meeting, and the game got into the 60s as well. Stanford's defense is still a question, but San Jose State's defense, they were giving up points and letting Idaho march that football up and down the field against an FCS opponent. So I'm going to look at over, just again, with where sometimes it's you bet numbers, not teams.
That's right.
That's what this feels like to me. That because this number is sitting in that 49 and a half range, we can get there with an over here in this Bay Area battle, San Jose State, Stanford. Rob, do you agree or disagree there?
Yeah, I think for that exact reason. And it's funny, week after week after week, as I do these shows, I always talk about it, Ian. You're betting numbers. And sometimes betting these games in the 40s is a better play. I just mentioned the Stanford Virginia game last week, right? Totaled at 49.5, much like this one is, got to 68. Is this one 20 points worse than that one? Probably not. Walker Eggett and company for San Jose State. Heading into the season, a lot of people thought they were a contender for the Mountain West. Maybe not beat Boise State, but be second or third. Didn't happen first week of the year. The Central Michigan, Texas, we can excuse them for. Last week, they bounced back with some offense that may be coming in the weeks ahead. And I don't find Stanford to be that imposing on the defensive side so far this year. Boston College almost scored 24 points in a row in the second quarter, and then Virginia did what they did. So I'd be with you there. I think San Jose State, it's a rivalry game for them. They'll come to play. I think we probably do get into the 50s.
All right, let me see what we got next. We got just a couple of more. Oh, this is the Notre Dame part sequel, if you will. The team that's gone over every game, and we're just taking it. Now, this one I have concerns about. So I have concerns about them all. There's always an element of a bet you like that you're concerned about. For me, it would be the Auburn offense in this game, but I'm still going to go with Auburn, Texas A&M over here because Texas A&M has been a dead nuts over team. Marcel Reed in the passing game has looked just so much crisper, so much better so far this year, no question. And for Auburn, the defense, I think, hung in there, but I question this spot. That defense was on the field a lot. It was a physical game with Oklahoma last week. They fall short. They got to play on the road for a second straight week against a very explosive, dynamic offense, and they can run the football. I love Le'Veon Moss on this A&M team as well. I think Auburn could be a little bit weary defensively, after that bruising game against Oklahoma. A&M gets their points. Can Jackson Arnold on the road lead Auburn to enough points to help this over? And I got to say, there's a lot of holes in Mike Elko's defense right now. I mean, they have not. I mean, Utah State's scoring against them. UTSA moved the football a good amount at College Station against A&M. And again, we're talking a total in the low 50s. I think we can get there. So Auburn A&M over. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, you can make cases here, and I'll preface this by saying I have not bet it yet, but I'll go ahead and add on to what you were saying. Auburn is so diverse offensively, Ian, and we saw it in the Baylor game, first game out of the chute, right? Dave Aranda decided, I'm going to take Coleman and Singleton, that wide receiving tandem, which you can argue is top 5 in the country. Those two guys together, they are difficult to defend. Baylor took them out of the equation. Auburn rode their offensive line and their running game to 300-plus yards. So whatever you want to take away, they can do the opposite. And as you mentioned, I think UTSA, I'm doing this off the top of my head because I don't remember, but I believe UTSA ran for over 200 against A&M in that game. So it's there for Auburn to take.
And they need the run game if their offense is going to thrive, correct?
Well, and the quarterback run game factors for both of these teams, right? Marcel Reed, mobility on one side, mobility on the other side. So both teams have a lot to defend here. I could see that definitely. You get the public perception that Texas A&M is this stout defense, Auburn's this stout defense, but Baylor threw for 419 against Auburn. Neither one is really a stout defense at this point.
Western Kentucky, Missouri State is my next one. This is, to me, a hand-in-glove fit. Western Kentucky throws the ball a ton. Rick Bowie, the offensive coordinator, bringing in Maverick McIver. We've talked about how the symmetry was there for the offense, and Missouri State's by far the weakest link in their defense is the secondary and the big passing, the explosiveness they've given up in the passing game all year. I was, a bit conflicted here. Do I push more for the Western Kentucky team total over in this game? Or do I go full game over? But I honestly do like both. I would consider splitting it up. I like Jacob Clark. I think Missouri State and their offense can move the ball enough against still a bit of a somewhat suspect Hilltoppers defense, and they're at home. So I think Missouri State can move the ball a bit too. So I like over there. What do you think?
I think the choice is the right choice, and I would be full game rather than team, even though both can get there. But I do think Missouri State can contribute here. As somebody who follows the FCS a little bit, and this is the team that moved from FCS to Conference USA this year, they can score. And Western Kentucky still doesn't stop people. So, league game, and you got the home side here. I think they can contribute 24-28 in this one. So I would definitely say full game over.
And sometimes you got to go to one of the biggest games on the board on a Saturday in college football for some overs that you like. Doesn't always happen this way. Sometimes, I think there's a low-scoring battle between two of the better teams in the country. I don't think that about the big showdown with Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit on ABC Saturday night, and that's Alabama, Georgia. I will go over 52 and a half here. I like what I saw from Gunnar Stockton in his first real test as a starting quarterback on the road, tough environment, Neyland Stadium against Tennessee's defense. The Colby Young, I mean, look out for him as a receiver for this Georgia team. Very, very impressed. I think Ty Simpson working alongside Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, who, of course, are back together again, running this offense for Alabama. He's getting better and more comfortable. I know there's some weaklings there, Wisconsin Sisters of the Poor with Wisconsin and Monroe the last 2 weeks, but nevertheless, I mean, how good is Georgia's defense? They didn't play anybody till they played Tennessee, and then Tennessee's just moving the ball up and down, big plays. What I don't like, Rob, is Georgia's secondary. I haven't liked the just losing the ball in coverage against Brazzell in that game, not finding the football, getting beaten down the field in the passing game. If that's happening against Tennessee, and a guy that can throw the ball a bit in Simpson for Alabama, it could happen there as well. And I also don't know how good Alabama's defense is. We saw them give up 31 to Florida State, and they haven't played any offense since then, any good offense, any big-time offense since then. So reasonable total, 52 and a half. And some reason, Alabama versus Georgia the last few years, it's just been points. And we saw it last year too. So over in the big one there in the SEC, Alabama, Georgia. Agree or disagree?
75 last year in that game, Ian. 75 points. I'm always of the opinion that coaches like to fix what went wrong, and I'm sure Kirby Smart will go to the tape and say, how did I give up that many points last year? And the same on the other side. Kirby Smart's a better defensive mind than anything Alabama has to offer here. I don't know. I'm still not sold on Ty Simpson in this offense. Ryan Williams is fantastic, but I'm not sure that if Georgia does play good defense, they get there. I didn't bet it. I can't really place a great argument for the under in this one, so I won't. But I'll root for you on that one.
I like
we'll
it.
how that one goes.
On the fence for that one. I like it.
Let me just say real quick here, as somebody who bets a lot of overs.
Nobody ever loves everything I say, so it goes right in hand with that.
I saw 7 touchdowns get called back by holding penalties 2 weeks ago, and I saw 6 red zone interceptions in the end zone last week. So these mistakes happen and they drive me nuts. Hopefully we get deeper into the season. They don't happen as much, but it's taken away from some of the overs so far this season.
All right. Before we go to NFL to wrap it up with the Overpalooza segment, let's do a role reversal. You throw a game at me that you like the over, and we'll see if I agree or disagree. Anything that we haven't mentioned yet?
Well, I'll tell you, the first one I bet this week was Kansas State, Central Florida over 49.5. And again, we're back into those games in the 40s. But when I had read that Chris Kleiman said that Dylan Edwards is expected to be back at 100% this week, full speed, it sent me right to the over here. Kansas State has played 0 defense. The secondary was supposed to be the weak spot, but they played 0 defense. And for Central Florida, with Taven Jackson, I think he's completing 71% of his passes. So I thought Central Florida could go on the road and get theirs. And I definitely think off of a bye week, that Arizona game where KSU only scored 19, Avery Johnson, just give me a decent amount of the gimmies that you're missing, and this thing should get over. I've made a lot of money the last couple of years betting K-State over simply because the public and odds makers' perception is there to where they place this team in this type of range all the time. And I think they're better offensively and worse defensively than most people think.
All right. I have mild agreement, but I played the side in this game. +6.5 is the number I took with UCF. I know it's K-State off a bye. I don't know if the bye is enough to get it together. I mean, Avery Johnson looked not good in that Arizona game. I didn't feel threatened if I'm Arizona watching him trying to drive down the field late to tie that game. He was way off. Hope the bye week helps. Dylan Edwards, certainly if he plays, to help get the run game going. But you're right, that defense is not good. I don't know what Scott Frost saw in camp to say Cam Fancher's a better quarterback than Taven Jackson. I'm still shocked by that. But nevertheless, because of injury, he's in there and he's the better quarterback. And I think he's going to stay the quarterback, even when Fancher's ready to return and play. He's been good. He played well in place of Curtis Rourke at Indiana under Kirk Cignetti last year. He's the better quarterback. He looks it, and they shredded poor Hoodie and Bill Belichick's defense last week. So, yeah, UCF side, but no real argument for me with the over. One more that you got for me in college football.
Let me just go to tonight, Ian. Thursday night football, if you don't mind. I played the East Carolina team total over 27.5. Army's defense shredded by North Texas last week. The only reason I didn't play full game total because somebody would say to me, well, why don't you just play full game? Because how are they going to defend the option? And it's true. You're trying to defend the option on a short work week. But Army's got a couple of injuries to both their quarterbacks here. Now the lines come back down, which indicates somebody's going to one of the top two is going to start for Army. But I trust what I trust, and that's ECU, which has a step down in class here. They played the BYU defense last week, 404 total yards, but 2 crucial turnovers, again, on the BYU 6 and the BYU 15 that stopped them from scoring even more than the 13. I think East Carolina, Army's defense, just not what it was. And for those who say, the common narrative, Ian, is always, well, Army runs the ball, they grind the clock, you're not going to get many chances. There was just 79 points scored against North Texas last week. I mean, these other teams respond against Army quickly because Army doesn't defend well. So I think ECU over 27.5 team total. Paid a little juice with it. I think I laid 30 cents with that, but I think it's a good side.
There you go. So there's the college football version of Overpalooza. We'll flip it to the NFL for these last 10 minutes before we wrap up the show. An over that I will be on for sure. Now, the NFL, I actually think this week there's a decent amount of under potential on this card with the way things are shaping up, especially with the injuries. There's teams that are mangled on the offensive line. There's teams that have some key skill position talent out, quarterback injuries galore as well. So that is certainly something to factor into what we're seeing here this week. So there's not a bushel full of overs that I'm loving in the NFL, a few that I like. One of them that I do like, and look, I'm not alone because the total's been bet up a few points already, Colts-Rams. I think, when you look at the way these two teams and offenses are operating, Stafford and the Nakua-Adams combination, I know the Colts defense has played reasonably well so far, but come on, you're coming off Tennessee. You can't do anything offensively with Cam Ward and a horrific offensive line that the Titans have. They're treating that offensive line for the Titans, man. They're treating Cam Ward like the human whoopee cushion. Like he is just absolutely getting just crushed every single week. Now you're going to face, obviously, a Rams team that's got definitely offensive potential. And Kyron Williams maybe can get the run game going. But on the flip side, you can't love the fact that the Rams played great defense for a half, and then all of a sudden they couldn't stop the Eagles in the second half to help lend a hand to one of the worst beats I'll ever suffer with Rams plus the points in that game. I was on the over. That's why I was not as livid as I would have been otherwise, because I split in that game. I should have went 2-0, Rams and over, but I at least had the over in that Rams-Eagles game. So it softened the blow of losing in just crushing fashion with the Rams. But Daniel Jones looks comfortable. Sometimes it's just give me a shot. Give me an opportunity to have a fresh start, clean slate, and he has fit well with Shane Steichen. And they have a Jonathan Taylor-led run game that's helping not put all the pressure on the shoulders of Daniel Jones. I think the receiving corps is a little bit better than people think. Alec Pierce is better than people think. Pittman's better than people think. Obviously, a good tight end as well. So, like I said, I think there's points there, and obviously no weather issues. We're at SoFi in LA. So Colts-Rams over, agree or disagree?
I would, at this price tag, you got to get to the 50s. I'm not going to disagree, but I'll go lukewarm one more time. I'll tell you exactly why. The matchup here for me, because the Rams are such a good pressure front, Jared Verse and company. Yep. But the Colts have the offensive line. Who wins that matchup? Do the Colts protect Daniel Jones, who's been his uniform? They didn't punt for the first 2 games, right? Nobody's touched this guy. Yep. He's going to probably get touched here a little bit. Can they open up the same holes for Jonathan Taylor that they've been opening against this defense? Well, the Rams certainly shut down Saquon Barkley last week when they put their minds to it. So for me, it would be, can the Colts contribute enough offensively? I think the Rams will do their share. To be honest, last week I had a 2-0 in that Eagle game because I had the Rams team total over and the full game over. So that was the easy part of it. Rams, I trust here totally, Ian. If the Colts offensive line can do the job, it's going over 50. There's no question. But if the Rams defensive line gets some penetration, they stop that running game a little bit, you might get held a little bit short. Maybe it lands around, what are we looking at now? 49.5. Like I say, 48 is a high scoring game, 28-20. We'll see how it goes, but that would be my concern.
Next one I'll go with is just hoping this next over that I like. It's good Geno Smith, not bad Geno Smith, but we'll go with Bears Raiders. I think they finally got their offense going with Caleb Williams last week. I mean, you can't be happy with the fact the Raiders defense is getting trucked by, of all people, their former quarterback, Marcus Mariota, last week with the Washington Commanders. That was an ugly defensive game from the Raiders. And now the Bears finally come in here with a little bit of offensive confidence. Now, it did come against a pretty bad Dallas defense, but still, Chicago was looking for an offensive breakout game. They got one. I think they can move it on the road against the Raiders. I think Geno at home, and the Bears defense still has some concerns and question marks. And Dallas was moving the ball, and they'd go for it on fourth down, and they'd turn it over. I mean, Dallas was moving the ball, and so the 14 points makes it look like Chicago's defense was a lot better, and it was a little bit better. Dallas missed some opportunities to punch in more points. So I do like Chicago, Las Vegas over. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I could agree with that. I think that Caleb's getting a little comfortable with Ben Johnson's system here, and the Raiders, asking the Raiders to stop a Ben Johnson offense, I'm not so sure. Pete Carroll, obviously a good defensive mind. I just don't think he's got the parts. Again, I think the pressure means everything here. If Crosby and company start rattling, because Caleb is so easily rattled. But if they can keep him clean, they can run the football a little bit. I can see them doing their share, and I do think the Raiders at home, the Bears defense, you're absolutely right. I mean, did Dallas get picked in the end zone 3 times last week? It was crazy.
Yep.
So I would say agree on that one.
All right. Now, that's really all that I'm really, got a pretty decently strong opinion on as far as overs for Sunday in the NFL. There's 2 that I've got on the watch list. And one is Carolina, New England, just because of, I think Drake May and the offense can get theirs. I'm not as sure about Bryce Young and Carolina necessarily getting theirs. So I may look more Patriot team total. And I like how that sets up. Carolina, how many times do they have a good game after a good game? Carolina, after that thumping they gave Atlanta last week. I don't exactly trust them to duplicate that on the road in New England. And then the other one I've got the other one that I want to bet over, and I haven't yet, and my concern is, do they do enough? New Orleans and Buffalo, just because of the fact that is Rattler and the Saints going to do enough? That offense, obviously it struggled in Seattle last week, couldn't get out of their own way, but that Buffalo defense is still working through injuries, and it is an obvious flat spot after beating Baltimore, beating the Jets, finding a way to win a divisional game Thursday night against Miami. You do worry about a letdown for the defense of the Bills in this game, but on the flip side, if Buffalo's even not totally eyes shut and sleepwalking in this game, they could score on every possession almost against this New Orleans defense. So I've got kind of my eye on the over there. Rob, you can throw any NFL game where you like an over at me, and I'll see if I agree.
Well, I could combine with you, Ian, on that New England game, and I would add to it that I think the Carolina side, New England's secondary is so bad that Carolina is going to find their way to 7.
Are they going to get Christian Gonzalez back this week? I think they are, but I haven't had firm confirmation on that yet.
Yeah, it's almost as if Vrabel decided, I want to build a defensive front, and whatever happens from there happens. But you're going to need Carolina to get to 17, because I think 27-17 is a likely final score. And that gets us, 44 is a key number, and we get paid on that. So I could definitely agree with that. What I think is the best of all of these games on the board goes Monday night, Ian. And the Denver team total sits at 26.5. First of all, you should just blindly fade the Cincinnati defense every opportunity you get. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe because Carson Wentz was quarterback last week, I didn't. But even they got some defensive help, I get it. But they went over without it. But here's the other half of this equation, and you can take it from a Bronco fan. The accolades that Sean Payton and Bo Nix get for being this, improved offense, I'm telling you, go back to last year and you just see when they do it, it's against a miserable defense. So far this year, they've done nothing offensively to speak of. Couldn't do it last week again, but now they've got this Cincinnati defense. Sean Payton finally is coming under a little bit of fire from Denver beat writers for, what's going on here at 1-2. Your offense doesn't look very good. No. And he's going to get bailed out because they're going to score 30 against Cincinnati. There's no question. Bo Nix might throw for 300. So I'm all over that. I think Denver team total over 26.5 is like legalized stealing, in my words.
And I'll throw out one more team total. And maybe I'm a prisoner of they face Cincinnati's defense, and some of that was defensive touchdowns courtesy of Jake Browning, making the point total look more inflated for Minnesota. And I've never been the biggest fan of Carson Wentz. Not many people have been, but he's paired with a good head coach and an offensive-minded head coach and a former quarterback and Kevin O'Connell, and it's a nice fit. He's got an O-line that had Darisaw. Finally, Darisaw. on the field for the Vikings and weapons galore, obviously, to work with on offense. In a good situation for success. I played Vikings team total over 20.5 in that early morning game in Dublin, Ireland next week or this Sunday against Pittsburgh. I still don't think Pittsburgh's defense is very good from what I've seen. I mean, you look at last week, I know they won the game, but holy shit, if New England doesn't turn it over a million times, including twice on the goal line from Ramondre Stevenson, you can't play that guy anymore if you're Mike Vrabel after those multiple fumbles. I mean, that's what saved Pittsburgh's skin in that game, was all the fumbles. I mean, New England's moving the ball up and down Drake May and company against Pittsburgh's defense, and it was the turnovers that did the Patriots in. Now you got to face Minnesota. Wentz has a little confidence. You remember the Steelers getting bludgeoned by Justin Fields and the Jets offense in the first week. And even the Seattle game was, meandering on the defensive side of the football from them. And some books still have it below the key number of 21 in that Sunday morning game with Minnesota's team total. So I like that. Vikes team total over 20.5.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I don't know, you might have said it, Ian, and I might have missed it, but it is the return of Jordan Addison, right? Just to give them an extra weapon. The suspension's lifted. Now you've got Jefferson and Addison. It gives Wentz even more to work with. And to your point about Pittsburgh's defense, totally agree. Mike Tomlin's out there picking up street free agents a couple of weeks ago to try and patch up this defense. It makes no sense that he would have a defense that poor. Definitely think they could. And I'll add to that point total with this. I feel like Brian Flores will heat up Aaron Rodgers, and maybe you get a sack fumble. Maybe you get something where the defense contributes to your team total over here. So I really think Minnesota's a solid play.
There we go. Good stuff. How about that? Over Palooza. That was a lot of fun, man. Yeah. That was great. That's not bad for a debuting segment here on the Football Frenzy. I think we both enjoyed that. Lots of fun. Great stuff, Rob. Always fun. We'll get you on in October for sure once again. But we wrap it up with best bets to wrap up this edition of the show. It can be anything. CFL, NFL, college football. You can go wherever you like with best bet, Rob. Have at it.
You know what? Let's go CFL. Ian, I really think Montreal is going to win by 10 or more tomorrow. The line, even at the current price, I know you could have got way better. It opened 1.5, and now we're looking at we have to win by 5+. But I do think Montreal is a team that's on the rise right now. I would take the Alouettes minus the points here as my best bet for the show.
There we go. I like it. You went with a Friday night CFL game. I'll go with a Friday night college football game. In fact, this is already up on Twitter. I posted it. Free play right up there is there for Florida State, Virginia, over 59.5. Both of these teams have combined 7-0 to the over this season. I think both offenses can move the football. I think both defenses will be in for arguably the toughest test they've had all year. Florida State had to face Alabama, but I like the Chandler Morris throwing it, Jamari Taylor running it combo for Virginia. I think at home they're going to be able to have some success against Florida State's defense, but I just don't know if Virginia's defense is going to stop Castellanos in this thriving Florida State offense, which is just putting up big numbers every week. So Florida State, UVA over 59.5 for my best bet there as well. Rob, great show. Great stuff as always. Before we end it, mention how to follow you, get on board with anything of your subscriptions, you name it.
Yeah, real quick, you can find all my work over at wagertalk.com. Free video, a lot of free content over there, guys. Videos, written content, et cetera, et cetera. If you're interested in selection packages, of course, they are available over there at wagertalk.com. They've got a deal going on this weekend for Saturday, Sunday, Monday football. So once again, go ahead, take a visit, wagertalk.com. If you want to find me on Twitter, if Bo Levi Mitchell has a poor road game, you'll see me rambling about how I'm ripping my hair out over Bo Levi, but you can find me
even a Cat fan will back him up every step of the way if you do that, if that happens. Yeah.
At Rob Vino Sports on Twitter, or X as it's called now.
Great stuff. Great show. We hope all of you enjoyed it. That was a lot of fun, as it always is when Rob Vino joins us here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Hit the like button on the way out. For Rob Vino, I'm Ian Cameron. Enjoy everything football this weekend. CFL, NFL, college football. Enjoy the games and good luck. And we will see you again next time for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.